Hi, Reagan. Hey, Patrick.
Hello, and I have a fuzzy companion with me here today.
Aha.
Come over here. Hey, Furball. Furball. Oh.
I can't tell if that's a cat or a dog.
Doesn't look like he's particularly interested in the class.
Oh, come on. Well, I mean, wait. Okay.
Hi, Parker.
Nope. He's a kitty cat.
Lamish, you hiding today? What's going on?
Oh, there we go. There he is. It's a giant old flute ball.
I've never seen a cat that color before.
Actually, Professor, I have to tell you something. I have 20% left on my laptop, and my charger's at my friend's house. So if I disappear, I didn't leave.
Lamish, I'm sorry, but can you turn your volume up a little bit because I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, I said my laptop charger is at my friend's house because I left it there yesterday. So if I leave unexpectedly, it's not because I left; it's because my laptop died.
Oh, so you're saying your friend was more important than you spending this hour with me?
I brought my laptop charger because I was doing work at her house yesterday.
Okay. Anna, do you believe that?
I can always
I guess.
my phone though. I can join from my phone.
Lamish, we have history, so I'm going to trust you. It's all good.
Go ahead, trust me. Go ahead.
Hi, Sarita.
Hi.
All right. Parker, I think you're in a new environment today. Were you in that environment?
Yeah, this is my
Tuesday?
room. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. You just had it sitting at a
You
different
see
angle.
more of my ceiling now.
Okay, all right. I'm a memoryaholic, so I remember all of the stuff you guys set up for me. Oh, interesting thing. Notice right behind me over here? If you guys ever saw the movie, remember the Titans?
Oh, my dad loves that movie.
Yeah, well, that over here, yeah, that one behind me is the original team, and every one of them signed the picture.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So I have good things. All right, so where are we? Oh no, we still have time. So we can just talk openly until 11:15 when we are scheduled. But as I said, I'll always try to get in a little early. So if there are any questions anyone has, we can address those and knock them out of the park before we start the class. That's right, Patrick. Come up with a good quip. I saw you thinking.
Oh no! I just remember when she was talking about the laptop. I was trying to think, how can I work up a pun with the word charge in it? Does that mean she's not going to get charged for any more of the class?
Well, I won't pay for that comment.
Well, I mean, are you going to coin a phrase there?
A
little heads up. I'm not usually the one that's on the tail end of these kind of things.
Well, I'll probably only address a quarter of it.
Oh, you stole it. But they come a dime a dozen.
All right, so we are.
Professor, when I first read your email, when you sent out the info about yourself, I'm like, whoa, this guy sounds really serious. But now I met you and you're full of jokes and I love it.
Yeah, life is too short to be serious all the time.
Yeah, you gotta have fun. It's a mess. It's a party. You enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Any day above ground means I have options.
It's like petting a floofy, fluffy, friendly little cat. Yeah.
Let's see, who is that? Arnaldo. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Professor. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I have no complaints openly.
Same. It's a good morning.
That's
Are you
right.
allowed to complain to your students?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I would, but I have nothing to complain about. You guys have already started and made my day spectacular already. So, and let's see. Look at Natalie. She's there, all intent, structured. Let's see, who was that? Colette just joined us. Colette, is that Portuguese or French? Pollet. Oh, you're muted.
It's French.
So is it poulet?
We pronounce it Pollet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Let's see. Who do I have at the bottom? Mob. Hey, good morning.
Hi.
Let's see. So Rosa's iPhone. Well, good. At least I have the name. Hi,
Yeah.
Abigail.
Yeah, I tried to do it on my computer, but my mic wasn't allowing me to speak, so I just changed to my iPhone right now.
Okay. When you log in, are you Apple or PC?
Apple.
Apple. Okay. So for Safari.
Well, I use Chrome, the Chrome for
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Do we
Yeah.
need to have
Oh,
our
You can get the
names?
Zoom app on your iPhone because that's what I'm gonna do if my laptop dies. So,
Oh, let me
Yeah.
say that again.
Yeah,
So
that's
maybe
what
it'll
I'm
help Rosa.
because I have the Zoom app on my phone and I downloaded it and it works through there. So I don't know if it like gives you any complications through the like Chrome browser or anything.
yeah, that's what I'm using right now. The app on my phone. Thank you.
Do we have to have our last names in this chat thing?
No, because fortunately there's no one in the class who has the same first name, so I can apply that toward my roster.
Oh, thank goodness. Last
Hi,
semester.
Betha.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing extremely well, thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, so where are we? 11:12. So we've took the 3 minutes to chat. So, Sophia, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
So I like La Tour Eiffel
Hmm?
with
Excuse
Rosa. Her background is La Tour Eiffel.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, this right here?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
Excellent. I love that. Yeah, when I was in industry, I would actually travel to France to teach for a couple of weeks. Okay, so let's see. We are.
Sometimes your foot just gets caught by the cat, and then the cat decides to move away.
Yeah, it says I don't like attention. Turn it away.
I miss having a cat in the house.
No.
Mob literally has a kitten in her hands, and I want.
Wait, where? Oh, kitty cat!
Look at
Aww!
Abigail,
Aww.
what is your painting of behind you?
I don't know. It's just a random house.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty.
Okay. It
I have
looks
my
like
dog with me too.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've-
Oh, okay. Oh, so this is a pet day. Okay, I got it.
Should I go call my dog?
Go for it! Why not?
If they start barking or meowing, whatever they do, just make sure you mute it and then we're okay.
Nah, Sweet Pea's not a barker. She'll just stare if I have food.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
Furball,
All
are you
right.
gonna let out any meows? He's just chilling under my bed right now. Which, totally ignore how much of a mess it is. Totally ignore it.
That's okay. As my dad says, if you don't live there, you don't get to complain. All right.
No, my dog's too lazy to move.
All right. So T minus 30 seconds and we will begin.
Leo's.
Oh, we have some people waiting. Let them in. Okay, good. All right, so 39, I think we only have 39 in the class, so that means everyone is in.
Leo's.
Okay, well, let's kick it in. So any questions on any of the introduction syllabus? If you note, I did update the syllabus, so it does have the dates that the assignments are due. It also has tentative schedules, and I'm going to try to stick with those for when the exams will be administered. So you can go out and look at the updated syllabus, and hopefully that'll give you any answers to any questions you might have. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to share the PowerPoint so that we can start there, and we will begin with chapter 1. All right. So even though we did introduce this slide, I think we ended here when we were talking about a deeper understanding and how that matters.
Yeah.
But let's start with the first question. And the first question is, what stands out for you, or is something that would attract you to this billboard?
The colors?
The arms?
Colors?
Okay, the colors. What about the colors?
I always liked blue. Blue's a nice calming color.
Okay, so does light blue have any relevance to that poster? Do you think?
It's talking about Christmas, so that blue is kind of like a wintry, Christmassy color.
Okay, yeah. And notice at the bottom it has like a snowy outlay, so Christmas again. So it gives you the colors that are associated with sky and snow and all of that, so it attracts you there. And then what, as significant, does it reference? And not just the colors.
The jewelry.
The jewelry. So notice the jewelry is sparkly, and even if you look to the, let me make this a little bit larger. And notice that their snow falls. And notice how the jewelry is coming from Christmas and falling into the object on her finger. And even on their other fingers, other jewels. But now, so what is unique or stands out with the person who is on the screen?
I think that she's really pretty, and like her hair is in a unique way.
Yeah.
That stands out.
Yeah, and notice her makeup.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
her makeup is. Go ahead. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Like dark, so it really stands out in the whole poster, and I really like that lipstick shade though.
Yeah, but you're right. So we have the light blue and the snowy kind of colors, the wintry colors, but then those are highlighted in light, and then they're offset by the dark outlines of her features. And even, you know, like you said, her hair, but it's a very sultry look. And it's a sultry look that's attractive, even enticing. Okay? And if we look at what they don't show, is we don't know she has any clothes on at all, right? It depicts a sultry look, someone who is enticing and very attractive, so that it would draw attention to her in a relationship or romantic type of way. So now we make an association, a mental association, that here is this beautiful woman during Christmas, the sparkle of Christmas, and oh, by the way, the association is jewelry means naked woman, sultry naked woman, right? And again, because our minds have to make it up, we don't know, but we can assume. And so a lot of folks may associate that romance, a loving romance, is associated with jewelry. And if you want to have your partner be sultry and maybe naked, then you want to go to Jared's. You want to get jewelry because that is associated with this image. Now, one of the things, we'll talk about this later, but one of the things that they used to do in, and you guys are probably too young to remember it or even know about it, but there was a series of Playboy magazines. And Playboy magazines were supposed to have like the top models, the most enticing women on its cover. And of course, they ended up also doing a topical magazine called Playgirl. And so they would have the most enticing men, physique, all of that on their covers. And so, yeah, like Patrick. And so what they would do then, and it was interesting, but the alcohol commercials or alcohol advertisements would put a glass with maybe 3 cubes of ice in the glass and put the alcohol around it. But the chips in the ice spelled out 3 letters. And what do you think those letters were?
Oh.
Sex.
Yes. So the 3 letters, but you couldn't see them consciously. So it was just a shadow of the letters, but subconsciously, if you had ever been introduced to those letters, which most of us are because we can do the alphabet, then subconsciously it would spell out the words sex. And so people would buy up alcohol or go to bars and they would buy tremendous amounts of alcohol because subconsciously it was associated with having sex. So unbeknownst to the people who were looking at those advertisements, they were being conditioned subliminally to equate alcohol with sex. Absolutely amazing. We'll talk about subliminal perception later on, maybe like in chapter 9 or chapter 8. But that's the idea. So as we said here on the second slide, it was critical thinking. Now, critical thinking tends to be conscious, but subconsciously, how do we associate things to influence people's thoughts and even their behaviors? And that's the nature of what we're going to talk about as we continue to go through the chapter. Let's see, hold on a minute. Let's see. Let's see, I'm very uncomfortable with the energy we have created in the studio today. What does that mean?
It's just a joke, Mr. Humphrey.
Oh, okay, all right, cool. All right, because I don't get the context, so when I go back through it, I want to make sure that I'm not making anyone uncomfortable, but thank you for clarifying. Okay. Let's see. All right, yep, rings equal fun times. Oh, now I get it. Okay, I see what's happening. You guys are operating behind the scenes. So let's go back, and so what we're going to continue to talk about is what is this thing, you know, when we look at the psychology of not only advertising and marketing and all of those things, when we think about critical thinking, you know, it's, now the definition, of course, the process of objectively evaluating, comparing, analyzing, and synthesizing information. So, so let's ask a question. How do you evaluate something?
You like record and like over time you just keep watching things and analyze and basically keep record of things.
Okay, so that's probably the post effect.
You
but,
can oh sorry.
No, go ahead.
Comparing and contrasting to previous schemas and biases that you already have to
Okay.
build more schemas.
Great. And so we will talk about schemas later, but the idea is that we have created an image, something that represents something. So to evaluate, we must first know. Because you can't compare or analyze something that you aren't aware of. So critical thinking says first we have to have knowledge. And once we have knowledge of something, then I can evaluate it. But in evaluating it, what must also exist? So if I know something that is, what must I also know?
What is not?
Yes, right? Because in order to compare something, I have to know what I expect it to be. But I must also, in order to know what it is, I must have an understanding of what it isn't. And so if I compare a blue pen to a red pen, I have to know what blue means and what red means. Otherwise, I can't compare the two because without that knowledge, they are the same. And in order to analyze that, I need to know the characteristics of what I expect those things to be, and also what I expect things not to be. So as a result of those characteristics, I can do a comparison, and then from that comparison, I can synthesize what I know and then make a decision about what it is I expect or desire to be the outcome or the solution. All right, is that clear? Unclear? Muddy water?
It's a little bit of both. So I'm kind of confused, but also somewhat understanding.
Okay, what parts are confusing?
I guess trying to understand like what you were saying, like what you do know and what you don't know about the whole I guess.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Actually, and that's it. That's good. Thank you for at least making me aware of that. So, if I say that something is beautiful, how do you know what beauty is?
Well, because like it's complicated because what you think is beautiful is different than what I think is beautiful. But
Okay, so let's only deal with your view of that. So, what would you? How would you define beautiful?
like something that like the appearance of it, like if it like the color, the physical appearance can like if it entices me, like anything that is the color of blue, I just find that very beautiful.
Okay, so let's take that. No, that's very good. Let's take that.
Mhm.
So if you say it's something that entices you, then that means that something that doesn't entice you, you don't consider beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the idea. So by knowing what is, you also know the opposite, what it isn't.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we know what light is because we also know what dark is. So we know that light isn't dark, right? So that's the idea. So no, great, Elizabeth. I'm glad you asked this, and now hopefully that clears that up for you. Okay, so that's the idea. So once I have, and remember the circle of psychology that I shared with you guys, right? Our experiences could allow us information that we can use to store in memory. So later on, we can do associations and create knowledge. Well, knowledge is as a result of having information in our memory. So that means we know something. And then based on all of the information that we have, we synthesize that, we bring in all of the pieces that represent what it is we're looking for, and we can make a decision and behave. Right. So that's where it all ties in. Okay. So critical thinking allows us to define what is based on what we know. And then it doesn't matter that we don't know something, but we know what we're looking for. Okay. And so we have to define psychologically when we believe that something is valid or not. And the way that we validate things is through experimentation. So through experimentation, I want to be at least comfortable that if I recreate conditions, that the majority of the time I will get the same outcome. So for instance, if any of you have ever gone to a psychic, or you've read your horoscope, or palm reader, or something like that, those outcomes, if you read it tomorrow, it changes. If you go to a different psychic, you may get a different reading. If someone else reads your palm, you may get a different reading. Well, because we can't with any certainty say that you will get the same results every time you go through this experience, it is considered a pseudo-psychology, right? Because we can't prove it through repetitive experiments. If I can prove it within a reasonable doubt, then it is considered a valid psychology. It is considered, as far as psychology is concerned, it is valid, right? It represents what we think it represents, and those conditions, the majority of the time, will give us the same outcome. And I'll talk about how we validate that in a moment. But so pseudopsychologies, we cannot reproduce experiments that will give us the same outcome the majority of the time. And that's the difference. So psychology, when it first began, or when someone first coined the idea of psychology, it was not considered a real science. Now, primarily because they didn't have MRIs machine, they couldn't do, neuroscanning and determine which areas of the brain were lighting up. They didn't have the technology. And also because they didn't have the technology, and even today, we can't read people's minds. What happened was they said, well, it's all conjecture. And if you can't prove it, then how can you say that it's a science? So it began with structuralism, and structuralism said, well, look, yeah, we can't read somebody's mind. However, if we can identify their experience, if they can tell us what's happening with them, then we can try to make sense of it. Of course, we had to rely on whether or not that person was telling us the truth, right? Or making up their story, because as we know, whenever someone shares a story, they sort of twist the story to make sure that they're looking good. So they may change some of the facts. And so structuralism says, well, we'll use introspection. And introspection is simply this, guys. Introspection is simply that we look into ourselves and reveal what we feel, what we think. And so during structuralist days, we had to rely on, or psychologists relied on, someone telling them their experience. Well, many in the scientific community said, well, wait a minute, that's not good enough, because since you can't read somebody's mind, we don't know if that's true or not. So you can't validate it. So structuralism sort of died off and was reintroduced as functionalism. So functionalism said, okay, we still can't read somebody's mind. However, we can start to identify different emotional responses and different behaviors as a result of certain conditions. So why do we experience anger, and what are the triggers that cause someone to be angry? Why does it cause one person to be angry and another person not? So now we can start to not only quantify, but qualify those experiences based on behaviors and outcomes. And if certain surroundings, as it says here, identify the functions of experience and how it helps us to adapt to our surroundings. So why do different cultures, different environments, different beliefs cause different outcomes for some people and not for others? Well, if we can identify that the majority of people respond similarly, then we can say, at least with the level of certainty, that these triggers can be identified. And once they are identified, we can have a pretty good idea of what they cause as an outcome. So functionalism lasted a little bit longer. Now, those were the two. So functionalism pretty much still exists, but now we have qualified it as behaviorism, as psychoanalysis, as humanism, and we'll talk about those guys, so don't worry about them. We'll talk about them later. Humanism, and then positive psychology, all of those things have born out of the functions of experience. It started though, and many of you have probably heard of Sigmund Freud. Well, Freud is the father of psychoanalysis. So he was the first to qualify unconscious results and even resolves. So we'll talk about Freud in much more detail later. But the idea was, Freud said our behaviors are as a result of unresolved conflict and unresolved issues. Now, they aren't the only ones, because Carl Jung, who, as Peter talked about, says that we are also the result of our genetic experiences. So our fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers had thoughts and certain behaviors associated with thoughts, and they believe that genetically those transferred even as you are born, and adapt that genetic blueprint. So Freud says if we can figure out a way to interpret these unconscious thoughts, then maybe we can deal with the conscious impacts. So unconscious processes and unresolved conflicts that influence current behavior. And usually those tend to be abnormal behaviors, like the Ted Bundys and the guy that ate people and those kind of folks, right? We'll talk more about that. Okay, so we're going to look at, we'll probably look at 5 or 6 of these in more depth than we will the others, but we'll go through these 7 and talk about what they mean. Now, what you see on the screen is psychodynamic, and you don't see psychoanalytic. Well, they are very closely aligned. So psychoanalytic says that it is introspective. Again, it's the person that develops or creates his or her unconscious dynamics. As it says here, their motives, conflicts, and past experiences create their unresolved issues and affect their development in some way. The only difference with psychodynamic from psychoanalytic is that psychodynamic says it is not only the person, but it's the person's environment that can also influence those thoughts and behavior. So let's use an example there. Someone who is continually bullied. Well, that person interprets why they are being bullied. And if they interpret it as an individual introspectively, they could have the reasons that, well, it's because I grew up in a single family home, or it's because I'm small, it's because I'm not as smart as I'm not smart. And now notice all of those are self-revealing, because the responses are, it's because I am not, I can't, I don't deserve, right? So that's all introspective. But if I look at it from a perspective of psychodynamic, it says now as a result of the environment that I'm in. So now that same person may say, because others don't like me, I don't fit in with the group. It's because where I grew up is not the same as where others have grown up. So now we are attributing it to the external environment. So psychodynamic says it is our environment that also influences those unconscious thoughts and unresolved conflicts. Okay, did that help with the difference? Okay, all right, so now we move into behavioral psychology. So behavioral is not just how you interact with or how you feel about self and what your behaviors manifest themselves into. Now it's about your interaction with others. How do other things in an external environment, whether it is people or things, how do they influence our behavior and cause us to respond in certain ways? And what we know is that because we are human, we have a prefrontal cortex and we have memories, that certain triggers, certain stimuli will automatically, in some instances, automatically provoke certain outcomes that are natural and genetically predisposed. And then there are others that will happen as a result of the consequences associated with it. And we'll talk about those in chapter 6 and chapter 7. The third is humanistic. Humanistic is absolutely introspective. It's about the individual, but not just about their behavior, but it's about their self-confidence, self-awareness, self-efficacy, self-concept. We'll talk about all of those later. But humanism is about helping the person to be better as they see themselves. Cognitive psychology is about the way that we think. How do we activate different centers of the brain in different situations and cause different responses? So how do we process thoughts, and how do those thoughts manifest themselves into our behaviors and the kinds of things that we respond to, even our emotions? Biological psychology gets into more of the connection of neurology with psychology. So what are the genetic and biological processes that are stimulated as a result of our conditions? Many of you are aware of this, so I'm preaching to the choir. But when you are sad or depressed, your body creates the hormones to support that condition. And when you are happy, your body secretes hormones to support happiness. And so biologically, what are those hormones? What is the chemistry that causes us to feel and think different ways? Evolutionary psychology is about simply the adaptation and the changes we make to adapt into the environment and in the conditions or cultures that surround us. And then last but not least, it's sociocultural. And that's, so how does society influence our behaviors and our thoughts and our conditions? So those are the 7. We will not spend a lot of time with evolutionary. We will spend a little time with biology because we'll talk about a little bit of neuroscience. But outside of that, we'll deal with the other 5 more explicitly. Okay, so any questions on either of those 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
can you like go over biological and evolutionary, like the difference between them again?
Yeah, the biological is more genetically predisposed, it's more innate. So we have our genetics, our DNA sort of defines who we are. And since it defines, our height, weight, size, even, our thought processes, all of those things, the psychology is interested in how biological processes affect our thoughts and behaviors, right? So why is someone more depressed than someone else? Why is someone more euphoric than someone else? And even as we look at the implications of drugs, whether they are illegal or pharmaceutical, how do those drugs change the nature of our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors? So that's the biological side. The evolutionary side is twofold. One, how do we adapt to our environments, our changing environments? And the other is, how do we promote longevity or our heritage by focusing specifically and conditioning certain people to behave in a certain way? The example that I have currently in my head is when you look at someone, let's go back in the past historically. Kings and queens and those who were descendants of kings and queens, they only allowed their descendants to marry either people who were also a part of the aristocracy, or they could marry people from other countries, but they also had to be a part of the aristocracy. So their evolution was, if you keep like-minded people together who understand natural tendencies, then we can promote and keep current those feelings, those thoughts, those behaviors. There are people of means, meaning the 2%, who believe that they are supposed to be in the 2%. And if you are poor, you're supposed to be poor. So evolutionary psychology looks at how some adapt while others don't, and then the progression of that causes our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Did that help?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. And cognitive is the way that we think. So how do we process thought? How do we use our senses to develop what we think about, and then how do we store those thoughts? What are the connecting points in our neural pathways that cause our thoughts to be negative or positive? What stimulates differing thoughts? So that's the idea of cognition. It's the way that we create and then manifest our thinking into behaviors. Did that help, Elizabeth? Okay. And guys, absolutely continue to ask the questions because really, if it offers clarification for you, I'm sure that probably 10 or 20% of the other class who didn't choose to ask the question wanted the same clarification. Helps the entire class.
Professor?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go over sociocultural just like briefly a little bit?
Yeah. The sociocultural is now society and our cultures. For instance, and again, I'm not an expert in culture, but the culture in some Middle Eastern countries, women have certain roles, and if they defy those roles, it can cause serious implications. So the culture tends to dictate my behavior. And if I adhere to those cultures, then I conform to those cultures. In the US, women are structured to have equal rights. And even though there's still pay disparity, But women don't have to be subservient to anyone. And they don't have a certain role or place that they must adhere to within this culture. But that culture dictates how we respond and how we behave and how we act. Right? So sociocultural is, what are the implications of societies and cultures that dictate our behaviors and even the way that we interact with others? C'est bon?
Thank you. Yeah, I get it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Andres, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so here are the 7, and again, we just talked about them, but these are the 7. And notice that all of these individual psychologies sort of fit around the biopsychosocial. So biopsychosocial just takes all of them and says, look, even though they exist, they can't exist independently, it's really a composite of them that creates our biological, genetic, cognitive, sociocultural, evolutionary existence. So I'm not going to talk about the individualist and collectivist cultures. Now, did we talk about individualistic and collectivistic? We may not have. So let me see. I think there is a slide. Please remind me if
We didn't talk about it, but there isn't any individualistic stuff in the other sides.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll just briefly touch on it now. And the idea is simply this: collectivist cultures tend to be concerned with the good of the whole. So when someone of a collectivistic culture does something, it's not for personal gain. It's to allow everyone within their sphere of influence to also receive benefit. So their impression is they're working, whatever they do creates a benefit for those around them. In an individualistic culture, their belief is that everyone around them is there to support their development, their progress, their growth, right? So it becomes more individualistic in that I work toward what will help me and will make me better, and I'm not as concerned about those around me. Okay, so that's the basic definition or expression of those two. And I think we'll talk about it more, but that's at least a start. Now, if you're interested in any of these particular fields of psychology, we can talk about those offline. I'm not going to cover all of those today, but if you have an interest, please let me know and we can discuss. We can discuss either of them. I'm familiar with all of them, and I've worked in many of them. So, other than sports psychology, but for the rest of them, we can have a discussion. All right. So, as we let's see, the question is, what kind of society do we live in? Okay, yeah. All right. So, even with structuralism and functionalism and all of the other forms of psychology, what we have to do is figure out, how do we know what we know? And what can we validate with respect to psychology? So two of the ways that that's done is either through basic research or applied research. So basic research, here's your first question of today. So I want you to put this in the chat box. In the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, doctors recommended a certain substance for pregnant women to help them relax during their pregnancy. What do you think that substance was? All right, I got a problem. So many of you mentioning cocaine and meth. We're going to have to do some individual questions here. Okay. All right, when everyone has answered, I will give you my answer. Let's see, not yet, not yet. You're close, but not yet. Yeah, drugs, yeah, that's a good general answer. Okay. So here's the answer. Nicotine. So cigarettes were recommended for pregnant women. Now, so think about this in the form of basic research. If we didn't have that research to go on, and if we had not advanced the study of nicotine and cigarettes, they may still be recommending cigarettes for women who are pregnant. But as a result of knowing the research and then continuing to experiment and create new research, we know that nicotine is dangerous to the fetus, right? So basic research says, let me take what is already existing, but continue to evaluate it to make sure that it is still valid. So it simply advances scientific knowledge. So effectively, this takes what exists and then continues to expand upon it. So typically conducted in a university or research laboratory because they want to replicate the conditions that will cause the outcome. Now, applied research is designed to solve practical real-world problems or things that we don't yet know. And since we don't yet know the conditions, we can't set up the conditions in a laboratory, and that's why it's generally conducted outside of a laboratory. Okay, so second question. At what point in history do you think the concept of smartphones or Bluetooth technology first existed? At what time in history do you think it first existed, Bluetooth and smartphone technology? Okay, so I got a 2010, a 2000, 1990, 80 to 90, 99, 2014, 20th century. Oh, another general answer.
Can you repeat
11.
the question again?
At what time in history do you think the concept of Bluetooth technology and smartphones existed or came into fruition? Okay, so 1980s, a long time ago. Oh, there's a, I think that's a Star Wars reference. Okay, the other answer, 1969. So some of you, and I'll reference the Star Wars response, but in the 1968, 69, 70, Star Trek first was introduced. And on Star Trek, during that period, Lieutenant Uhura, who was a communications officer, whenever she wanted to speak with Starfleet or someone else, she would press the button in her ear, and that would open the channel of communication between her and others. She was the only one on the ship with it. And then Captain Kirk would tell her, put them on screen. So Skype, Duo, FaceTime, all of that, the concept of that was in the 1960s. Whenever they transported to a particular planet, they would open their flip phone and tell them to beam them back up. All of that stuff existed in concept in the late 60s. However, didn't come to fruition because of technology until 1994, right? So because the technology didn't exist before, there was no way to know how well or what impact that would have. And you don't have to answer this one through the chat room, but if you want to answer through unmuting, what is the most addictive element as of 1920, well, as of 2020? What is the most addictive element to humans?
At a table or in elements like nature elements?
Coffee.
Notifications.
Just your cell phone in general.
That's it, cell phones.
Oh, element, my bad.
Cell phones are more addictive than drugs.
Well, at least it's healthier for us.
No, it isn't healthier for you because remember, it's a cell phone, which means that it has to have microwaves or cellular technology, which means that frequencies are entering into your brain at different levels. They were really concerned in the 80s and 90s that cell phones were causing brain cancer. Now, other than, and they've hopefully satisfied a lot of the cellular technology, but even now that addiction, I'd be willing to bet that 90% of you on this call, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is check to see if you missed any texts or any messages. And some of you right now are probably chatting away while we're in the class. And if you aren't, so that I can't see it, you got it sitting over to the side. So it's that addictive. I actually did a seminar for a corporation, and I asked all of the participants just for 2 minutes to turn their cell phones off, or to put it not on vibrate so they couldn't hear it, and turn it over so they couldn't see it. I mean, adults, 30, 40, 50-year-old people going through withdrawal symptoms because they couldn't see the front of their phone and see if they were being notified of something, right? And this is lifelong, because most of you have had a cell phone since you were, 4 or 5, right? So the addictive properties of that are not necessarily good, but I understand the connection aspect of it. But that's what applied research would do. I don't have history, I don't have background, I don't have technology, and since it's new, now I need to research the problems that are associated with that. Now, think of this simply ergonomically, right? If you have a child who is concerned about the range oven, right? The way that this is aligned, now does this top one mean that because it's closest to this one, that's the one that it represents? Or because it's on the top, does it represent this one? And there's no real way of knowing except turning them on and burning yourself, or at least observing it. Over here, now by simply changing the nature of these dials, this one is not only to the furthest right, but it's also to the furthest right and up. So now it's much more probable that I know which one of these represents which one of these. And for those of you who have ever watched a YouTube video of a 1960, 1950 car, you know that the steering wheel was larger than your laptop, even your computer screen. They were huge, but they also reduced the ability to look at the devices that were there to give you information that was needed. Were you running out of gas or what? Were you speeding? So simply by changing the nature of the instrumentation panel and the size of the steering wheel, it changed the factors, or at least your observation of factors that were necessary when driving. Okay. All right. So again, applied research, even the chairs that some of you are sitting in now are ergonomically structured so they're much better for your, and I will show you this because, and for any of you who do a lot of typing, your students, I'll show you this keyboard, and simply note that and I'll put it up a little bit more, but note that the keys are actually offset, they're slanted. Well, think of that from an ergonomic perspective. Your wrists are meant to stay straight. And the more that you bend them, the more that you put pressure on your wrists, which creates or promotes carpal tunnel syndrome. So keyboards on laptops are structured to increase the probability of carpal tunnel. So if you get a keyboard that is slanted or structured left and right, now as you type, your wrists stay more natural and it decreases the possibility of carpal tunnel. And if you're having any problems with your wrists, this is not a sales pitch, but it's just something because I just bought this one, Micro something over in Fairfax has the ergonomic keyboard for 49 bucks. And it comes with a wireless mouse if your wrists are hurting. Okay, that's my sales pitch of the day, and I get nothing from it. All right, so where are we? We're at 12, so we're still doing good. Okay, now, in order for any research to be validated, absolutely, I'll pick one up at Micro Center for you and deliver it. I'll have Amazon deliver it right there for you. All right, okay. So in order for us to validate any research, it always has to go through these 6 steps. So the first step, question and literature review. Now the question really is a couple of things. What is it that I'm looking to, excuse me, what am I looking to investigate? And does it matter? You know, why am I doing it? So the question simply is that to determine if there's a reason or a significant benefit to doing that particular research or that study. And then the literature review, the reason it's combined with it, because it will help resolve the question. Is there already information out there that I can use to create a different starting point? Or do I need to start from scratch? So the question and literature review are step 1. Let's see what's already out there, and then let's leverage it against the question as a starting point. The next is a testable hypothesis. So a hypothesis is this, and I'm going to go here so that you can see the definition. Thank you. So a tentative and testable explanation about the relationship between 2 or more variables, a testable prediction. Let's put that in layman's terms. Here, so there must be at least 2 variables. So I could use or say something like this. Women score have higher overall scores in Psych 200 than men. All right. Now, I don't know that that's true. And that's why it says, no, Reagan, you do not get to comment on this one. I know you're probably saying, yeah, that's right. Okay, so women have higher overall scores in Psych 200 than men. I don't know that it's true. But if we go back to the definition, it is a tentative statement about truth, right? So I don't know that it's true until I test it. And in order to test it, I have to experiment or create an experiment. But it meets the criteria of a hypothesis because the statement does have 2 variables, women and men. And then it talks about the comparative nature of those 2 variables. So it is either going to be equal to, greater than, or less than. That's it. And so the statement in this particular instance says that women are greater than men as it relates to scores in Psych 200. But I could also say women have lower overall scores. Or I could say women and men scored the same in a Psych 200 class on average, right? So as long as I have those comparatives, then I've satisfied the requirements of a hypothesis. Okay, any questions on hypothesis before I move on? No? Okay. All right, so let's go back. So a tentative and testable explanation. So I provided an explanation, but it's tentative and testable because I don't know that it's true. It's simply a prediction. So then my operational definition is what I'm going to do in order to prove that hypothesis or disprove the hypothesis. So back to step 2. I create the hypothesis, the statement that I believe to be true or that I want to test to see if it's true. And then once I have that statement developed, then I design my experiment. So now, how might I test my prediction of women scoring higher in Psych 200 than men? How might I test that?
You take, you go.
Apply test.
Comparing test scores?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Ooh.
Test scores, any assignments being given, and maybe even participation and how that results on their scores being shown.
Okay, not the scores, right? Because the scores are a post event. But what you guys said about having tests is correct. So my design is to administer tests that everyone can take. So that's my design. That's how I'm going to, that's my experiment for testing the predictability of my statement. That's step 3. Step 4 is what you guys said about the scores. Because now I want to collect the scores and I segregate it into the women in the class and the men in the class. And then I will continue to take averages over the semester. And at the end of the semester, I will look at the averages and say, oh, according to this data, women's scores are higher than men, or women's scores are lower than men, or on average, they're equal. And so that's the data collection and analysis, which is step 4. Now, once I have the data, and I can now say that based on this data, I have a projection or a prediction that is either right or wrong, then I can publish those findings. And in publishing them, I would publish that, based on my experiments and research and data collection, women do score higher, women don't score higher, or it doesn't matter. And then once I've published it, then I can validate that either I have created a new theory or I have advanced an existing theory. And those are the steps. So it's always those 6 steps, and it's always in that order. Okay? All right. So I mentioned before about whether or not an experiment or a psychology was considered valid. So that's where statistical significance comes in. So statistical significance tends to always be one of 4 criteria. Most often, it is greater than or equal to 90%. That's not strongly valid. But if I do an experiment, and generally we want at least 1,000 cases, if 90% of the time, I get the results that I am looking for, that based on those conditions, 90% of the time, I get the same result, then it is considered statistically significant. It is more statistically significant if it is greater than or equal to 95%. And most experimenters don't even deal with the 90%. I mean, if it's really general in nature, they may do that, but most often it's 95%, 97%, or 99%. And because nothing is guaranteed, you can't always replicate the same conditions, then you'll never, ever, in most instances, get 100%. So it's either greater than or equal to 95%, greater than or equal to 97%, or greater than or equal to 99%. Oops. That's okay. You know what I mean. An interesting note, side note, Amazon, who we have probably all used, Amazon requires that their delivery service is 99.98% accurate. Companies who provide services for Amazon and deliver their products, if they don't keep a 99.98% delivery rate, they get fired. So think about it. So 998 packages must be delivered on time out of 1,000. Or you're looking for another job or another customer, right? Pretty huge, huh? Okay. All right, capitalism at its finest. Well, those are companies. So those are company ratios, not individuals. But I'm sure an individual who didn't deliver them. Because remember, if you don't deliver something on time, the customer can get a refund. And we don't, well, I don't say we because I've got Amazon stock, so I'll say we don't want you not to deliver on time. All right. Okay, so meta-analysis is a simple term. and I'll give you just a brief definition. You are not responsible for remembering this, guys. Don't worry about it. But at least want to explain it since it's on the screen. Let's say that you are researching how comfortable shoes are. And so you may collect a lot of shoes and compare different types of shoes, different leathers, different cloths, different soles, different inserts, all of that. But that's all related to shoes. What else may be something that could impact the comfortability of shoes?
Size.
The heel height.
Okay, height. What about your feet?
If they have protection on the heel or not.
Maybe pre-existing conditions like a bunion or something.
Yes. Right. So
Protection from weather.
Yeah. All that you guys have offered is absolutely right. But the first research would have been only on shoes, right? So a meta-analysis says I look at several experiments, several research experiments, and because they are all related, I combine them so that I get a more statistical outcome and get a more developed outcome that I can use to determine which shoe really is more comfortable than another, right? So meta-analysis is nothing more than taking multiple studies and combining them. That's all it is. Okay. And a theory, as we talked before, well-substantiated explanation as a result of experimentation and validation for a phenomenon or a group of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed in research. That's just straight skinny. All right. So 4 main goals, and we talked about this. Remember, step 1 was, what is it that we're trying to figure out, and does it matter? So what is the nature of the behavior or mental process that's causing the issue? And in this particular instance, boys are more aggressive than girls. Now, we don't know that it's true because we have to test it. And then, why does this happen? And if I know some of the instances why it happens, I can set up the conditions to test it over time to see if in fact it happens 95, 97, and 99% of the time. My prediction is the hypothesis. So I predict that boys are more aggressive than girls, but I don't know that that's true until I test it. But I want to test it so that if in fact that is true, how can we modify those behaviors or the triggers that cause boys to be more aggressive than girls? Right, so that's the 4 main goals. One of the things that we do in discerning that is by establishing different kinds of research. So now we're only going to, I think, let me see. Yep, we're going to talk about this types of research, and that's where we'll end the day. So descriptive research observes and records behavior and mental processes without manipulating the variables. Because if we manipulate the variables, then we're causing the outcome. We aren't experimenting to see why the outcome exists. So in descriptive research, we simply want to observe, look at people in a natural state, look at conditions that exist without us manipulating them so that we can get a valid outcome. Now, ways of doing the descriptive research are these. Naturalistic observation is one. If you've heard of or haven't heard of Jane Goodall is the most respected researcher and expert on apes and gorillas. So she didn't go into a zoo and watch or observe apes and gorillas. She literally went into the jungle and lived for 2 years. And she lived in the jungle, and she was up in the morning and all of that. She observed them in their natural state, their natural habitat. And so she looked at interaction between families, what the hierarchy was, what caused danger, what kind of threats, how did they signal each other. So naturalistic observation, if I wanted to see how you behave with your parents, then I don't want to do that at the mall, because sometimes you're on your better behavior and parents don't want to see, want people to see them acting crazy at the mall. So I would literally want to be in a place where it's natural, i.e. your home. So that's naturalistic observation. Survey is just that, where you send out a questionnaire, you have people respond, And I can also survey by talking to a group of people. Case study is when there is something unique about a person or a group of persons. Let's say that people who have who get migraine headaches from cigarette smells. Well, not everyone gets a migraine from cigarette smells, even if they don't like them. But a case study would identify someone who gets migraine headaches from cigarette smokes and then studies them to see what that particular cause is for that person. Or if I know that there's a group of people who get migraine headaches from cigarette smoke, and I can study them because it is a unique case, but they all have the exact same symptom that I want to study. So that would be a case study. And then there's archival research, which effectively says, I don't have anybody to talk to, so I look at the existing data, or I don't trust the people that I want to talk to, so I look at the existing data and I make my decisions from that. So now, is anyone familiar with the Tuskegee experiment?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Would you share it with us? What was the experiment? Two people said yes. So one of the yeses. Speak up or forever hold your peace.
Are you referring to the syphilis experiment?
Yes.
Okay.
So what's
I
your...
just have a basic kind of like really surface level understanding, but what was conducted was syphilis was administered to a group of African American males, I believe, without their consent or understanding, to see kind of like the symptoms and results of syphilis.
Yep. And I, even though I like the term administered, I'm going to change that term, because generally once it's administered, it's voluntary. It tends to be voluntary. In this particular case, they took 20 or 30 African-American men in Tuskegee, Alabama, and brought them in under the guise of testing a drug. And of course, they were going to get paid for this little test. Unbeknownst to them, they were being injected with syphilis. And they studied them over the terms of their life to see what the biological, chemical, and physical effects of syphilis would be on a person. And oh, by the way, this was conducted by the CDC. So back in the day, they also had their own problems, right? But the people who were part of the experiment aren't alive anymore. The doctors and nurses and other people aren't alive anymore. So I can't ask questions. So I have to go to archival research, go to the archives and get the pre-existing data to try to discern what the experiment was, how it was administered, what the results were, all of those things. So that's how we leverage archival research. So that's where we will end today, because the next segment talks about correlations with a comparative to experiments and why they are different. And that's going to take a little more time than 2 minutes. So we will stop here. Are there any ending questions before we close the day? Because after this, you don't get to see me for another 4 days. And I know you're going through withdrawal symptoms, but you better get it in now. No, Patrick, that does not work. I'll slap your cat around. All right. All right, guys. Well, have a great weekend. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.
You on
Ciao.
Tuesday, Professor?
I'm sorry?
Thank you, Professor.
You're
You on
welcome.
Tuesday?
All right. Thank
Thank you,
Ciao.
Professor. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good
You're welcome.
weekend.
Yeah,
Thank
See
you
you
very
then.
much.
Have a good weekend.
You got it. All right. Take care. Right here, right here.